Long ago and far away, there lived a good king and queen. The people loved them, and their lives would have been very happy if only they had had a child. Years went by, and then, one spring, when they thought all hope was gone, the queen gave birth to a baby girl. The whole kingdom rejoiced. The young princess was such a lovely baby, they called her Aurora. Everyone was excitedly preparing for the christening of the new baby princess. Anyone who was important in the land had been invited to the christening, including all the good fairies. And everyone else in the kingdom was to have a day off work and a great big feast with cakes and jellies. But unfortunately, there was one important fairy that the king and queen had forgotten to invite Grizel Stinky. Grizel Stinky was a scary fairy who lived up in the mountains. People told scary stories about her, frightening their children into being good by threatening to send for her if they were naughty. On the day of the christening, everyone had a wonderful celebration at the palace, and there were lots of lovely presents for the baby. One person gave her a tiny teddy bear to cuddle, another gave her a rattle to play with, and another gave her a storybook for her to read when she was older. But the most magical presents of all were from the good fairies. One gave her beauty, one gave her a sweet nature, one a lovely voice, one charm, one kindness, and one a sense of humor. "Isn't our daughter lucky to have such lovely presents?" said the king, turning to the queen. "Don't be so sure," said a frightening voice suddenly. A cold wind blew through the hall. The door burst open, and there was Grizzle Stinky herself. Grizzle Stinky marched up to the baby princess, and as she passed, everyone held their noses as the smell was quite terrible. "I haven't given her my present yet," Grizzle Stinky growled. "My present is that when she is older, she will prick her finger and fall asleep. Forever." Grizzle Stinky laughed a terrible laugh and disappeared in a puff of smoke. There was a stunned silence around the palace until one of the good fairies laid her hand on the baby's head. "I promise that she will not sleep forever," she said. "She will only sleep for 100 years." The king and queen were still very worried, so they decided to ban anything sharp in the kingdom that the princess might prick her finger on. Years went by, and as Aurora got older, the people almost forgot the curse that was upon her. One day, when she was alone and bored, Aurora decided to explore all the rooms in the palace. She went from room to room, exploring all over the palace until she got to an old stone staircase. Up and up the stone staircase she climbed until she came to a room right at the top of a tower. It was the only room in the palace she'd never been in. So she peeped inside and, to her surprise, there was a little old woman busily spinning wool on a spindle. "Hello, my dear," the little old woman said. "I am pleased to meet you." And she stood up and tried to curtsy. "No, no, please sit down. I don't want you to hurt your back," said Aurora, hurrying forward. "Can you tell me what you're doing up here in the tower all alone?" "Only spinning silk, my dear, to make you a lovely dress," the little old woman replied. "May I have a go, please?" Aurora asked politely. "Of course, my dear," the little old woman said, and she chuckled quietly to herself. "Let me show you how." Aurora sat down with the spindle in her hand, and the little old woman began to show her how to spin silk. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Aurora's arm as a spike on the spindle pricked her finger. It was the curse. Grizzle Stinky's curse was upon her. Suddenly, the little old lady threw off her cloak and stood up straight. It was Grizzle Stinky all along. She laughed a wicked laugh and ran away, leaving the princess all alone. Because of Grizel Stinky's birthday curse, Princess Aurora fell into a deep, deep sleep. And all around the palace, people started to fall asleep too. The cook in the kitchen fell asleep. The guards at the palace gates fell flat on their noses and began to snore. The maids curled up to sleep with their feather dusters still in their hands. And the palace gardener fell asleep out in the garden. The palace cat just carried on sleeping because she was sleeping anyway. Even the king and queen fell asleep. Over the years, weeds, brambles, and plants grew up over the palace, and a deep, dark wood encircled it. Everyone was asleep, even the gardener, so there was no one to cut them down. As the palace disappeared behind the woods, the people outside began to forget it had ever been there. One spring day, a handsome young prince was riding his horse in the woods around the forgotten palace. He had heard the tale of a beautiful sleeping princess and a terrible birthday curse. The wood was so thick that the prince had to get off his horse and walk. He even had to hack through the dense undergrowth with his sword. Then, as he was cutting through the undergrowth, his sword suddenly struck some stone. It was the wall of a palace. Could the stories be true? Could this be the forgotten palace? The prince wanted to find out, so he began to climb the palace wall. When he reached the top, he couldn't believe his eyes. There before him lay the palace asleep, the guards still snoring, the maids and the cook sleeping peacefully, and the gardener still asleep in the overgrown garden, and the cat was still curled up asleep, of course. Even the king and queen were still asleep. With his heart beating quickly, the prince began to explore the palace. In every room people slept, so he climbed higher and higher, looking through every door, until he came to a tiny room at the top of a tower with a stone staircase. He pushed open the door, and much to his joy, there lay the beautiful Princess Aurora. The handsome prince leaned down and kissed her. At that moment she woke up, and the whole palace woke up with her, yawning and stretching, and wondering how long they'd been asleep. The cook woke up in his kitchen. The maids woke up still holding their feather dusters, and the gardener woke up out in the garden, and the king and queen woke up on their thrones. But the cat stayed asleep. She loved to sleep. The king and queen were so grateful to the prince for waking up their daughter and everyone else in the palace that they let him live in the palace with them. They were overjoyed, and everyone lived happily ever after.